Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of the Numbers Podcast. Philippe, we are January 16th. Normally January 16th are just when things are starting to get a little bit busy for us, but instead it's just been a whirlwind for the last few days.
It has not stopped. Good morning, Eric. It's good to see you again. Yes, so very busy time. We have leadership races, plural, that are getting underway. We have federal numbers, we have provincial numbers, so a whole lot of things to talk about. And of course, last week, you and I did an auction on the Liberal leadership candidate, the federal Liberals, and I'm sure we will revisit that now that we have more info. But where should we start today, Eric?
Yeah, we will talk a bit more about the Liberal leadership race, but before we get into that, we did have some new federal polling numbers that came out over the last little while, and I think they're worth digging into because they don't really show that there has been much of a change in the overall picture since Trudeau's resignation, and if anything, it hasn't gotten better for the Liberals.
No, it hasn't.
So why don't you take us through some of the numbers we had recently?
So Léger, the much-awaited Léger poll, I think when we saw numbers early in the year, in 2025, we figured, but let's wait for Léger. Léger had a poll in December, and it showed, of course, the Conservatives way ahead. But now, this new poll, 47% for the Conservatives, plus 4 since the second half of December. For the Conservatives, basically Léger joins the other pollsters that have now the Conservatives in the high 40s. 21% for the Liberals and 17% for the NDP. So the Conservatives plus 4, Liberals mostly stable. And the NDP, while a variation of 2 points is still within a reasonable margin, I've noticed that pretty much all the pollsters have seen the NDP going in the same direction. It's a small variation, but when everybody sees the same vector, the same direction of the vector, I don't think Jagmeet Singh helped his cause in this whole story. So, and the regionals, of course, very interesting. There's not much that stands out for me except for Quebec. I mean, the Liberals at 19% in Quebec is a story from Léger, but also the Bloc Québécois, 33%. That's the lowest number from Léger for the Bloc since early fall. And so perhaps the Bloc, it's still leading, but perhaps it's not a runaway train like we thought. So I guess we'll need more polling. But what about you, Eric? What did you see in Léger's numbers?
Yeah, because we had that jump for the Conservatives, and Léger has been one of the more, stable pollsters, not overreacting, underreacting to new events. So to see them go up to 47, we're now starting to see poll after poll, which is no longer the 40 to 45 range for the Conservatives. It is starting to get closer to 50 than it is to 40. And that I find is fascinating. Léger did have 2 sets of numbers, which was also kind of interesting. One where they prompted with the party names and the leader names, so saying Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, Justin Trudeau's Liberals, etc. And they did one without that. And they did find there was a little difference, not a huge difference, but the Liberals were a bit better. They're at 23% without Justin Trudeau's name there. So maybe that is an indication that his resignation is going to bump him up a few points once that kind of gets baked in. But it is still a huge number for the Conservatives. Yeah. And I also wanted to highlight the Nanos poll. Now, obviously, this comes out every week. It's a rolling poll. It is done over 4 weeks. Yeah. But what's notable about the latest one is that it's pretty much all post-Freeland, and it's starting to include, about a week's worth of post-Trudeau resignation. And that poll, too, is at 47% for the Conservatives, 20% for the Liberals, 18% for the NDP. And that is, again, a gain for the Conservatives since that pre-Freeland polling, a drop for the Liberals and a drop for the NDP. And for Nanos, 47% for the Conservatives is the highest they've had throughout this cycle. And 20% was actually 19.6% for the Liberals. This is the lowest they've had in this cycle. So it is pretty clear that this is either the floor, the ceiling, or a trend that's going to keep getting better for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives and worse for the Liberals and whoever is going to take over.
Yeah, that 19-20% for the Liberals, we think it's the floor. but I think we should state that it's the floor for now. Because at some point, I think we thought 24% was the floor. Okay, so there will be a floor again. It's just that we're not exactly sure where it is. So I will update my full federal projections on Sunday to include this Léger poll. And as I said, we were waiting for Léger to kind of confirm that, Léger is the gold standard in Canada in the past decade, to kind of confirm what others were seeing. But when we look at the regular house effect, if I could say this, we will see a 50 soon for the Conservatives. I mean, obviously the leadership race for the Liberals will get underway, I believe, officially next week. If it's not already official, I think it's next week it's official, right? Because the main candidates that we think are the main candidates.
The deadline to get in is next week. But
okay, that's what I thought, though.
I mean, you could get started now, I believe.
Yeah. But Mr. Carney and Ms. Freeland will get on board next week, and so we will know whether they have an effect. I don't think short term they will, but as we progress through the winter, and also there's a big event that happens next week, an event that sometimes we try to, I don't want to say forget, but we want to minimize it. We don't want to give it too much oxygen because it's a different country, but still, Monsieur Trump will re-become president on Monday. And we will see whether his threat of tariffs was just banter or if he's really going to go ahead with it. And then we'll see how the premiers react, how the federal government reacts. There were tariffs imposed unilaterally by Trump in his first term, and it lasted only a few weeks because Canada retaliated. And of course, a trade war is no good for anybody on both sides of the border. But it's gonna shake things up, and so perhaps this is kind of a baseline, a line in the sand that we have to put. Leadership race starting, pre-Trump numbers, so we'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah, you mentioned Carney and Freeland. We'll get to the Liberal leadership race in a second. There's one more thing I want to chat about, but the reporting that as of Thursday morning was that Freeland was going to get in early next week. And Carney might be in by the time you listen to this. I think that he's making an announcement on Thursday in Edmonton, so we're going to talk about that. But before we get to that, I got this question somewhere. I can't recall who said it. It was somewhere maybe on social media.
Yeah.
But what should we make of these kinds of numbers now? Because Trudeau is often prompted as the leader of the party. Canadians know that he's resigned. It's a story that had huge penetration. They don't know who his replacement is.
Yeah.
Can we, as you said, is this just a baseline? This is where we use as how to compare the impact of Trump, how to compare the impact of the leadership race. But otherwise, is it all that important that the Liberals are at 21% right now?
When we conduct a scientific experiment, the golden rule is always to change one variable at a time to see which one has an effect and which one don't, right? We can't do that here. There are several events overlapping each other, and so we will try our best to analyze the numbers with what we have. What I can say, however, is that we should not overstate how Canadians will react to a leaderless Liberal Party. We do not know. It could go up, it could go down. I think you and I, Eric, we go by the numbers. We go with the data we have, not the data we wish we had. We have to be very careful. And I think in a just purely analytic way, I'm very thankful that there's a prorogation. Not politically, of course, but for our work, for what you and I do, the fact that there is no scenario realistically that we go into an election with a leaderless party. That would have been just hell to make projections and interpret the data. We will know. It's going to be a big event, March 9th. The Liberals will have a new leader, and I think the next day, it's meeting the GG, and it's going to be official. We're going to have a new prime minister. I think this is what we should be looking for. In the meantime, the data is what it is. It's okay to sometimes overreact to data or overanalyze. I think we do it sometimes, although sometimes I try to restrain myself. But perhaps in the next month, it's some of it's going to be junk, and we'll have to be very careful not to overanalyze noise, right?
Yeah, it is. It will give us an indication of some impact of various events, but as you said, it is going to be a bit of a punch bowl of events, so it's going to be hard to pinpoint any single one of them. I do think, though, as well, I've heard, like, if people are looking at this, well, Trudeau's not the leader, so these numbers don't really matter. There is a level of baked-inness to this, where it's not just about Trudeau. It is about Poilievre and how people view him. It's about the Conservative Party. It's about the Liberal Party. It's about the government. When you look at some of the government satisfaction numbers, direction of the country kind of numbers, the Liberals' polling numbers make sense, right? So it's not like now that Trudeau's going away, the Liberals could actually be at 30. Like, that's not how it really works, right? There will be some effect, and we'll see what it's going to be over the next little while. But the idea that the Liberals are somewhere in the low 20s, regardless of who their leader is, and then that new leader will have to build them up from there, I think that's probably true. I don't think it's a mirage right now of the polling numbers that they're meaningless. They still are, I think, the starting point for whatever comes next over the next few months.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I mean, we focus a lot on the Liberals here because obviously they have a leadership race and they're the government. But there's tons to be said right now about the fact that the NDP is still stuck in neutral. That the NDP has not been able to make gains. Okay, maybe some regional numbers are better for them, especially in the West, because the Liberals are just tanking west of Ontario. They're not doing too well in Ontario, but west of Ontario, we saw horrible numbers. They're in third place everywhere. And so maybe the NDP can hope to make some gains at the expense of the Liberals there. But when we see those numbers, 17, 18, 19, 16% for the NDP, there's a story there. How come the Liberals have lost about, a third of their support since the 2021 election, and the NDP has not been able to take advantage? That's a story. Yeah. Now, the Conservatives at 47. The thing is it sustainable?
Is it a sugar high?
Well, that's the thing. When they reach 40 and then 42 and then 44, we wondered the same question. And I remember saying, as long as Monsieur Trudeau is still there and his numbers are terrible, well, the Conservatives can just point at Trudeau as like, you don't like this guy, right? Well, we're the alternative. They will have to change their strategy now, a little bit, right? Will it be enough to just say whoever wins the Liberal leadership, he's just like Trudeau or she's just like Trudeau? That could work. But 47% is really high. It's historically high. During his 9 year in power, has Harper been that high? I don't think so. Polls here. I think there were a few polls here and there that were really strong when the attempted coalition with Stéphane Dion fell. But in the aggregate, I don't think Harper ever reached this level. I remember looking it up and I couldn't find it, but I think you've been following the polls for longer than I. From memory, do you remember the Harper Conservatives above 45 on the average? I don't think so.
Not on the average. I know that after the coalition affair thing, they did jump over 40 in some polls, but I don't think they got this high. The only time I think any parties have been this high over the last, 15, 20 years? 20 years probably, is I think the Liberals once in a while had this number during the pandemic and very shortly after Trudeau's win in 2015. Yeah. I think that's about it. And
Sugar
both
highs.
of those, in retrospect, were artificial, right?
Yeah.
It was a post-election honeymoon and a rally around the flag effect during the pandemic. So to have this level of support and for it to be relatively sustained, I mean, not 47, but certainly high 40s or mid 40s, is something. So I think they will have to work a little bit harder to keep it because, as you said, their strategy will have to adjust and shift around a little bit. But that'll be that's a good problem to have, a good challenge to have ahead for them.
Thing is also, I agree with this, but they could also say, at 40, we're winning a majority, an easy majority. 45, 47, that's just a sugar on top. That's just a bonus, right? So do they have to change their strategy? I think they will have to be careful not to overplay their hand, but they're leading by so much. I mean, they could, if the new Liberal leader makes miracles, and I do mean miracles, Eric. I'm not saying just completely out of left field and the Conservatives lose 10 points. They still win a majority with this. So, well, yeah, boy, I would say 37 if with a split vote. Yes, it would be a majority for the Conservatives. So, we'll see. But look out for those Quebec numbers. Not that I want everything goes back to Quebec, but this is the latest change. Because in the West and the Atlantic, that happened last year. Ontario, it took a little more time, but we regularly see 20 to 25 point leads in Ontario. If the Conservatives inch up close to 30 in Quebec, we could have many surprises. I would look at the West Island of Montreal. I would look at Laval. Suddenly, Quebec City, which is a battle between the Bloc and the Conservatives would look good in some of those seats. And so I still think the Bloc is favored as a natural none-of-the-above party. But that Léger poll in Quebec, I'm looking forward to see the next Quebec-only poll, which usually Léger does both federal and provincial with a big sample. If the Conservatives are in 27, 28, 29 range, there are some seats that will cause huge surprises if that holds.
Let's talk about the Liberal leadership race. So
Yes.
Here, wait. Let me go through my notes to see who we got in the Who did I get? Let's see.
You don't remember?
Sorry. I don't remember offhand.
I do.
Come on, it wasn't that long ago. Oh, maybe it was.
You have a better lineup left, but I still think I have a good horse here. So.
All right. Well, a lot of names dropped out over the last week.
Oh yes.
Christy Clark, which I think was probably the bigger surprise because it seemed like she was going to go regardless of events.
Well, hang on, though. It wasn't a surprise after Friday night, though. Oh, God.
Yeah, maybe.
How does an experienced politician think that you can just lie to journalists? Even she said she misspoke, which, okay, benefit of the doubt. But we have records. We you've been in newspapers for a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't like an investigative report to figure this out. It was like a web search.
In our exactly. In our mailbag after the episode last week, I mentioned, Christy Clark. Yeah, of course, she supported Monsieur Charest.
Yeah, you just from memory, you remember that.
From memory, and then denying this is like, hang on, I mean, what are you talking about? And so, yeah, it was kind of funny to see all those conservative accounts suddenly really liking the CBC for pinning Miss Clark. But okay. But yeah, Miss Clark, I think a very self-inflicted wound there.
Yeah, so she is out. Melanie Joly decided to get out. Anita Anand dropped out and also won't be running for re-election, which was pretty interesting. François-Philippe Champagne sounded for a bit like he might go, and then he doesn't. And then Stephen McKinnon also out. So who did we lost a lot? We lost a lot of people on our
draft
on our
or
auction there.
Yep.
I had Joly. Who else did I have?
You had Clark.
I had Clark. I think you had McKinnon and Champagne.
I had Anand also.
Anand, yeah. So we still, though, have the two biggest horses in the race. And so, as I said, Mark Carney is expected, and as I mentioned, by the time this might even be published, he might have already made his announcement that he is going to be in the race. Chrystia Freeland had that little tweet where she's got like 100 phones in front of her and says how she's going to be, has some interesting things to say. I'm sure it's not going to be, I'm not running. That's probably not going to be the interesting thing.
Well, that would be, yeah.
Well, it would be pretty interesting. Karina Gold looks like very, very likely she might run. And then we also have Jaime Batista, Chandra Arya, and Frank Bayliss, who are saying they're going to run, or we'll see if they can get in. And then there's still a question of Jonathan Wilkinson. Is he going to run? Isn't he going to run? Some big things to remember. There's a $350,000 fee.
Yeah.
The last installment has to go in on February 17th. You got to declare by January 23rd, so next Friday. Next Thursday.
Yeah.
You got to sign up by January 27th to vote. The vote's on March 9th. You can spend $5 million. I don't think anybody's going to raise $5 million. A week later, how do you think this race is shaping up?
I mean, okay. It looks like it's going to be Caroline Freeland.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Miss Gould, if she joins, good for her. That means she is able to raise $350,000. Because just to remind listeners, they probably know this, but you can't just take your money out of your bank account and just plunk that. No, you have to raise this money, right?
Yeah.
So
at $1,750 a pop, that's the contribution limit.
That's the thing. Oof. But I guess that Miss Gould joining, unless I don't want to insult anybody, but I guess it's for profile building, for future races, and the other three. Well, by the way, Monsieur Baptiste and Aria were not in our auction, so they are part of the field, which you hold, which you bought the field for, was it 10 Liberal bucks? But Mr. Bayliss was in our draft, and nobody drafted him. So if he wins, nobody gets the win. It will be a tie of you and I, both losers, on this. It's just that it's so much money and effort in such a short span of time that... Was this planned ahead for the Liberals to have a short race with only 2 or 3 contenders? There's only 2 contenders really here, right? Mm-hmm. So this is what I think at 1 week from now. I don't think it's very original. It's what we see. And also we had numbers from the Léger poll about the support for the candidates. Again, those polls poll the population. They don't poll Liberal sympathizers or Liberal members. So we have to be very careful, but we see that it's Carney and Freeland, and then the rest of the field has just crumbs of support. So it would be, if on March 9 we wake up and we see somebody else leading the Liberals other than Miss Freeland or Monsieur Carney, I would be shocked.
Yes, but I guess for Gold, she could, the idea of the candidacy might be that she could be the Stéphane Dion or the Dalton McGuinty of the race, kind of being a alternative after the two main candidates kind of blast each other. That, I suppose, is a path. It is going to be a tough one, especially with a race that is a preferential ballot. It's not like a delegated convention where you could try to convince people to come over to your side. Yeah. So she would have to finish ahead of either Freeland or Carney at some point in the balloting, which is not going to be easy.
No.
But I'm happy that at least there is a second tier of candidates in this race. Let's just call it that way.
Yeah.
Carney and Freeland are going to be the front runners. They're going to have tons of caucus endorsements, probably most of the best organizers and donors and all that kind of stuff. But if it was them two, and then Baptiste, Aria, and Bayliss, if they make it, that's a big drop off between it. With all due respect to them, they're Aria and Baptiste are backbenchers. They're not cabinet ministers, Bayliss is not even an MP anymore. At least if Gold is in, if Wilkinson is in, there could be that kind of second tier that at least might put more of a challenge on the other two and make it a better race, a more dynamic race. So I'm hoping that the field is a little bit bigger than just the list that made it so far. So we'll see what's going to happen with that.
But it's not going to be, right? That's it. There's no dark horse coming from left field here. And I mean, this is the list, right? And I still think that some of them will find that raising $350K is way too much for them. And if I can may, Monsieur Aria, this guy's a dream for the Bloc Québécois. So let's just hope that he... I mean, for the Liberals' sake, let's just hope that he doesn't get that far in the race, because the Bloc Québécois is going to plaster the social media with this guy, just disregarding the importance of speaking French for a prime minister. So, yeah.
Yeah. And also, I might have mispronounced Batista's first name. I'm sorry. It could be just Jamie. I just not sure. Yeah, we'll see what's going to happen over the next little while. Who's going to run? We got a lot of questions in the mailbag about the leadership race. Mark Carney, some of the rumors are he would run in Edmonton. How would that work out? We'll talk about that in the mailbag.
That's very interesting. Huh?
It's very interesting. But we'll see what's going to happen. I do find it interesting. I know it is just a poll of Liberal voters, and it's not the biggest thing in the world because they're not the people who vote in the race. But the fact that Carney led Freeland in the poll from Léger, 27-21, not a big lead. But prior to New Year's, any poll usually had Freeland ahead. So I'm just wondering if he has had that much of a a launch that he has actually improved his standing quite a bit. So I think that'll be something interesting to watch.
Or it's addition by subtraction. Monsieur Carnet can say, I mean, he said it on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, which I thought was okay, was pretty good. I mean, Jon Stewart, I think, is a very talented comedian and a good anchor of his comedy news show. He's not a great interviewer, when you keep interrupting your guests, so you can't make a full sentence before saying something. But Monsieur Carnet said he's an outsider. We both know that he's not that much of an outsider, but Miss Freeland is not an outsider. She was there all the way. She was elected in 2014, I think, in a by-election, and she's been by Trudeau's side the whole time. So maybe that's the anchor at the leg of Miss Freeland, is that the Trudeau years. Even though she broke off at the end, she will be attacked on that. So Monsieur Carnet probably has an advantage here.
Is there anything else you want to chat about before we move to the provinces?
Well, the thing is, in the Léger poll had really a lot of good stuff in there. It was a very interesting poll, so I encourage our viewers and listeners to go check it out. I wrote about this on my Substack. But there was a question, when should the federal election be held? And obviously, we are in an election year, so the options are not that. I mean, so the options,
smaller.
Yeah, that's right. The options given to the respondents were: I want the election now, I want the election this spring, or I want the election in October as scheduled. And the results, I'm not saying I was surprised, but they're interesting. So if you take all respondents of the poll, 32% said in October as scheduled. 30% said this spring. 29% said now. So this is a pretty even split field. When you broke it off by voting intentions, obviously you would expect the Bloc Québécois and the Conservatives to want the election as soon as possible. And in fact, yes, 52% of Conservative voters said now, we want the election now. But they don't choose. The Conservatives don't get to choose when the election will be. It's actually the NDP, or to a lesser extent, the Bloc Québécois. And among NDP voters, 12% said now. 53% said in October, as scheduled. I thought this was interesting. And it's not that small of a sample. It was 244 cases among NDP supporters, current NDP supporters. And I was thinking, could this be an out? Because Jagmeet Singh, Eric, you know this, you saw him speak in front of reporters just in the Christmas break, said unequivocally, this is enough, we will vote non-confidence at the first occasion. Well, what if there's more polling on this and we see that NDP voters don't want an election as soon as possible? Is this an out for the NDP to make some sort of deal, walk on the paint, as you so eloquently said last week, and make a deal in April, make the government survive, and we have the government, the election as scheduled in October? Eric, what do you think?
I still think it's. At some point, there's no real reason to do it. What are they going to get for 6 months? That
hope
is going to be worth the hit they're going to take on this. I just don't. I get it that maybe current NDP voters wouldn't be happy, but I don't think that going early would make them vote for another party. I think those NDP voters that don't want the election now are kind of desperate to avoid an election because they don't want Pierre Poilievre to become the prime minister. I think those people will still not want that to be the case if they go to an early election. So I get, and I saw some some commentary on that about whether the NDP would try to get something out of the government. But what are they going to get? Anything they get is going to be done in November when Poilievre would be sworn in, assuming they win the election. So I don't really. Maybe they'll do it. As we've often said, people don't always make the best decisions in politics. They don't always make the logical ones. But to me, at this point, there's no real. The cost-benefit analysis of it is that there's too much cost to prop up the government for what would end up being not once or twice. There would be multiple votes to keep the government in power for another 2 to 3 months, and I just think that is going to be too much to do. But
okay,
can't rule out making a bad call.
Devil's advocate here. I'm not advocating for a fall election, by the way. I'm playing devil's advocate here, right? You say the NDP would take too much of a hit for supporting the government. What hit have they taken? They're still at 18%. Their support has not moved. Now you can say, okay, so none of those former Liberal voters went to them. They went to the Conservatives. But what hit have they taken? So I don't know. This is an out, and losing assuredly now or losing maybe in the fall. Perhaps they figured, okay, let's just wait it out. Let's hope in the summer to have one last summer of this parliament, so we can tour the country and say how Pierre Poilievre is going to be, a madman in the House of Commons, whatever they will say. I think it's possible. Thing is, the NDP could also... I remember during the minorities of Stephen Harper, and stop me if I'm wrong, Eric, but I remember some votes, some confidence vote, where a party, I have the feeling the Liberals did this, would have one vote. Basically, the leader would vote against, but the others would abstain. If the NDP abstains, Bloc plus Conservatives does not beat the Liberals in the count right now. So it's close, but... I think this poll showed me is like, okay, this could give an out. I will ask Léger, ask this question again when the new Liberal leader is elected. I want to know what voters of each party think the election should be. I mean, an October election, we like that. It's the fall, right? We love the fall more than the spring when, we could have a snowstorm in April during the campaign. So I don't know. I'm kidding, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. An unseasonable snowstorm in April.
Hey, that happens. It happens.
Yeah. Okay, let's quickly move to some of the provinces. There was a poll in Ontario from Liaison, who we've heard from a few times, had 40 PC, 30 Ontario Liberals, 21 NDP. They've been some of the polling firm that has now and then had the Liberals a bit higher than other polling firms, so I'm not sure what to make of it. But, there's got to be an election coming. Right? Ford has
Wednesday.
more or less set the table for it, saying, I'm going to have to do hundreds of billions of dollars in economic stimulus. I don't have the mandate for that. We'll see what happens with the tariffs. Yeah. So if we get tariffs on
Monday
the
night,
day after Inauguration Day, I think a writ drop's coming in Ontario. I think that's pretty clearly what's going to happen.
Yeah, he telegraphed it so much, and you always need a reason, even if it's a bad one, you need a reason to do a snap election, which is, a year and a half early. So it's not just a few months, it's significantly early. But about this poll, we've seen from Liaison good numbers for the OLP, but we haven't seen many 30s, right? Usually it starts with a 2, it doesn't start with a 3. So we'll see. I think there's going to be much Ontario polling in the next few weeks, especially if the writ is dropped next week, as we expect. I expect at least. So we'll see. But this would be a really bad poll for the NDP. The PC's at 40, majority, easy. It's not going to be that close to the 63 seat mark. But for the NDP, they could suffer some losses in there with only 21%. Last time in 2022, as you know, Eric, both opposition parties were at 24. So that means that if you look at the vectors here, the NDP would bleed to the OLP. Now, I'm not sure if that will happen during a campaign. We'll see how Ms. Crombie and Ms. Stiles fight it out for the non-PC vote. Do you see any other scenario than a PC majority coming in out of this election? It's really hard. You have to stretch your imagination to see anything other, right?
Yeah, the other two parties just don't seem strong enough to put that much pressure on them. And I got to say, I kind of like, as a strategy, as a positioning, Ford's Captain Canada approach over the last little while with the tariffs. Because if there's one province where people are Canadians first and whatever their province is second, it's Ontario. And so I think for Doug Ford to put on that hat, quite literally, I think is a good move for him, and I think that probably helps him cement that number. And there will be some criticisms of going to a campaign when there's tariffs and all this kind of stuff, but I think the rationale that Ford has laid out might be a decent one for for the Ontario PCs. All right, Philippe, we haven't had a quiz in a while.
I just thought, well, why not? It's been a while, and I like inventing quiz for you, my friend. And this one is just a little trivia, just some questions about election history in Canada. And I know you usually do really well on those. So I have 5 trivia questions, and there's a theme. The theme is change elections.
Ooh.
So, do you want to go backwards in time or forward in time?
I always like going backwards.
Backwards in time. Okay. So 5 questions. Gold is 5. Silver is 4. Bronze is 3. Shame is 0, 1, or 2. So here we go. Number 1. Backwards in time. In the 2015 federal election, of course, a change election, the Conservatives increased their share of the vote compared to 2011 in one province and one province only. Which one was it?
Oh, that's interesting. That's it. Okay. Well, it wouldn't have been. I don't think it would have been in any. So it's from 2011. So it wouldn't have been in any of the western provinces. Wouldn't have been in Ontario because that would have meant that they won another majority. And I don't think in Newfoundland or Labrador or any of the Atlantic. I think it might have been Quebec because they only won 5 seats in 2011 and they won 10 in 2015. So I'm going to say it was maybe Quebec and they went up a teeny bit.
It was Quebec. They went from 16% to 16.6%.
Ooh.
So
hey, if those trends continue.
Absolutely. Right. But it was the only province where the Conservatives did better in that election. So, okay, 1 for 1. We go back in time. When was the previous change election? It was 2006. So in the 2006 federal election, how many territories did Stephen Harper's Conservatives win?
You mean like of the 3?
Well, that's a multiple choice question. So it's 0, 1, 2, or 3.
In 2006.
2006.
Oh, boy.
Harper's first victory.
Okay, Leona Glukak, did she win in 2006? Oh boy, I think there were still Liberals up there, but none of it did it go? I don't know. I don't think they won any. I'm going to say it was 0.
So Yukon was won by the Liberals.
Okay.
At the time, it was called Western Arctic, but Northwest Territories. It was won by the NDP.
Right.
And Nunavut was won by the Liberals.
Yes.
So 0 seats in the territories for Harper in this first victory. You are 2 for 2. Doing well, man. As I expect, you always do.
I'm almost out of shame. One more to avoid shame.
I have 2 questions on the previous change election, which was 1993.
Okay.
Okay. In the 1993 federal election, which party, led by Mel Hertig, ranked candidates in 171 ridings, managed to amass 1.4% of the total popular vote, but failed to win any seats?
That was the National Party.
The National Party of Canada is correct. Wow, I did not remember that. I did a little research. And you have bronze locked up. Okay.
Yeah, the National Party was, I think it was in a reaction to like free trade and this kind of stuff, that it was like a nationalist party, but not in the sense of like ethno-nationalism, but in the sense of, Canadian independence and protecting its sovereignty from the United States. Maybe there could be a rebirth of it.
Well,
What's Mel doing now?
I think he died. Yeah.
Oh.
But we're looking at the results. He did best in Alberta and BC. So kind of interesting. I had never heard of this, but obviously I was too young. But anyway, okay. So you're 3 for 3. Good for you. Number 4. Still in the 1993 federal election, how many seats did the NDP win east of the Manitoba-Ontario border?
Okay, I think they won 9 in that election. Is that not correct?
It was in that range.
Okay.
Was not a good election for the NDP.
Did they win any out? They didn't win any. Wouldn't have won any in the Atlantic Canada, none in Quebec. And I don't think they won in Ontario. So I think it was 0.
Is that your final answer?
That is my final answer.
And
Lock
you
it in.
are 4 for 4. The NDP failed to win. I mean, the Liberals won 100 seats in Ontario. The Bloc Québécois took almost everything in Quebec, and the Liberals won 31 of 32 seats in Atlantic Canada.
Oh, right, of course, Elsie Wayne. Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
So the NDP won 9, is that correct?
I think that's right. I didn't write
you
it
don't
down,
have it
but
right.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that's correct.
It was
yes.
9. It was 9, everybody, yeah.
Okay.
Don't check it up. Don't.
Oh, I think this is the hardest question.
Okay.
So you have to earn your gold. Are you ready? What was the
ready.
previous change election? It was 1984. So in the 1984 federal election, Brian Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives won the popular vote in every province. In which province was the margin the smallest?
Oh.
But the PCs won the popular vote in every province, all 10. I didn't check the territories, but all 10 provinces. In which province was the margin the smallest? And I can give you the margin. It was 3 points.
3 points. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's good. Oh, sorry. I've
For
got a
gold.
phone call coming. Stop. Someone's trying. I was doing my phone a friend.
Friend phone you. It's like,
Yeah, I think that. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna guess that it was probably the NDP because they won. They did pretty well in Western Canada, and so BC. I'm gonna say it was British Columbia.
Unfortunately, you get silver.
I was distracted by the phone call. That's
Would
not
you
my fault.
would you have a second pick? And by the way,
Saskatchewan.
you are
Saskatchewan.
correct. Saskatchewan is the correct answer. 3 points separated the PCs and the NDP in Saskatchewan. Almost everywhere else it was double digit. I think it was 9 points in PEI, but still a very impressive. So perhaps we are heading for something like this. I'm not sure about Quebec, but 9 out of 10 would still be very high to win the popular vote in the provinces. So you get 4 out of 5, and I would say 4.5.
4.5. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
4.5
think so.
is good.
I'll take that. Thank you.
Good for you, Eric.
Okay, number of the week. Why don't you go?
I've said to you in private conversation how sick I am of the chatter about the 51st state. Well, let's talk about it one last time because Léger had data on this. And basically, would you or would you not like Canada to become the 51st state? As Monsieur Trump has been frivolously suggesting and insisting, right? 11% Canadians said, yes, I would. 82 said, no, I would not. This is very hard to achieve in Canada, like a consensus like this, an 8-1 consensus. And I remember from my classes in political science at university, I did some of those. Very little unites Canadians, whatever language, whatever region, than the wish to not be American. So I thought there was... it's interesting. I'm sick of hearing about it because I don't think it's real. I think it's just bullying from a bully. But very clear results throughout the country. The answer is no thanks.
And that was also going to be my number of the week. So I'll
Really?
I'll refer to the one that the Angus Reid Institute did, and they also asked Americans this. And so my number of the week is, because I'm working from memory, it's a ratio. It's 2-1.
Yeah.
2-1. Americans did not want Canada to join the United States. So it's not even very popular south of the border. So yeah, it's not going to happen. Let's stop it. It's a bit worrying that an ally and friend would say things like this about us, but let's take it as flattery, because who wouldn't want Canada to be part of their country?
And also, I don't know if you saw, Politico did a little analysis. That was not too hard to achieve, but what if Canada joined as a 51st state, and he said, well, those 2 senators would be Democratic, and most of those seats would go to the Democrats, and it would not help the Republicans. And I remember I spoke with a journalist from Politico a few months ago about this, and he said, well, wouldn't Alberta be Republican? And I said, we have polls on this. Monsieur Trump had like 30% support against 60% for Miss Harris in Alberta. So when we say that Alberta is the Texas of Canada, no, it's like more the Vermont of Canada. Like, it's not even close. Even in the most conservative province, the Republicans would not do very well. They would do well, I'm guessing, in the most conservative, like maybe where the conservatives get 80% of the vote or something. Perhaps, but the Republicans would not win Edmonton and Calgary. The numbers don't show that. So yes, so very interesting. Let's never speak of this again.
Well, one last thing. You say Canada would be Vermont, United States. I don't think we'd accept getting 2 senators and having as many senators as Vermont.
Well, California...
PEI should get 2. PEI 2. Newfoundland, Labrador get 2.
That's right.
We'll
20 senators.
2.
We
should have 20 senators. That's right. And then 1 each for each of the territories. Maybe, I don't know how that would work. But anyway, it's not going to happen. And let's just stop it.
California would like to have a word. So
yeah,
it has 2 senators, same as Vermont. So
yeah, but they signed up for that. We didn't sign up for this.
They did.
That'll be it. We did sign up for more episodes of The Numbers, and we're going to chat about a lot of stuff. We've got a lot of questions on the Liberal leadership race, which we'll get to in the mailbag.
That's right.
So if you'd like to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca to get access to the mailbag. And we're also going to do our special episode later this month. Don't know exactly what it'll be just yet, but those are always fun, so we're looking forward to that. So Philippe, have a great week, and we'll chat in 7 days.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Thank you, everybody. Head to the mailbag for our questions. Some of them are really good.